I watched in silence as they poured the concrete foundation on what I knew was my land. The excavators had torn up the soil days earlier, and now a team of contractors were laying the groundwork for the Oak Ridge Estates Community Association's new clubhouse. I sipped my coffee from my back porch, catching the eye of Sharon Hartwell, the HOA president, who waved with that plastic smile of hers. I nodded back, my survey papers safely tucked away in my desk drawer. Some might call me calculating. I prefer strategic. My name is Frank Xavier. After 20 years in the Army Corps of Engineers, I'd bought this house at the edge of Oak Ridge Estates with my retirement savings. It wasn't fancy, just a modest ranch on 2 acres, backing up to a scenic pond, but it was mine. Well, mine and the bank's for another 15 years. I'd chosen this place specifically because it was on the perimeter of the HOA's territory, minimizing my interaction with people like Sharon Hartwell. For 3 years, I'd kept to myself, running my small drafting business from my home office, doing structural plans for local builders. I paid my HOA dues on time, kept my lawn at regulation height, and stayed out of neighborhood politics. Life was peaceful. Then came the announcement about the Community Enhancement Project. Sharon had taken the podium at the annual meeting, her frosted blonde bob not moving an inch as she enthusiastically described the new clubhouse they planned to build near the pond. "It'll have a fitness center, a meeting room, and a deck overlooking the water," she gushed. "Property values will soar. The only challenge is fitting it into our budget." That should have been my first clue. The budget-friendly location she'd chosen was suspiciously close to my property line. But I hadn't been worried, surely they'd do a proper survey before breaking ground. 2 weeks later, I came home to find stakes and orange marking paint just 15 feet from my back deck. Something didn't feel right. I pulled out my property documents that evening and confirmed my suspicion. The markers were a good 20 feet into my land. Most people would have immediately marched over to confront Sharon. Instead, I called my buddy Spencer, who runs a licensed survey company, and paid him to do a comprehensive survey of my property. The results confirmed what I already suspected. The HOA was planning to build partially on my land. But instead of confronting them, I made a decision. I would wait. Why? Because Sharon Hartwell had a history in our community. She'd forced the Wilsons on Maple Drive to tear down their children's treehouse because it was 3 inches taller than regulations allowed. She'd fined elderly Mrs. Patterson $100 per day until she replaced her unapproved mailbox. She'd even tried to prevent a combat veteran from flying an American flag because it wasn't the community standard flag sold through the HOA office. More importantly, I'd noticed something peculiar about the contractor vans that had been coming and going. Several had the name, Hartwell Construction, emblazoned on their sides. A quick search revealed that the company was owned by none other than Sharon's husband, Greg. Interesting coincidence that the HOA board had awarded the construction contract to the president's family business. As the weeks passed, I documented everything. I took daily photos of the construction progress, noting each truck, each worker, each delivery. I recorded Sharon's visits to the site, particularly when she arrived in her Mercedes SUV to speak with the foreman, pointing and gesturing toward my property. I researched our HOA bylaws, county regulations, and state laws regarding property boundaries and conflicts of interest. The foundation was poured in early June. By July, the frame was up. In August, they finished the roof and began work on the interior. Sharon sent monthly newsletters to all residents, praising the on budget, on schedule progress of our wonderful new community center. She even included a note thanking residents for their patience with construction noise, though she never once asked if I, whose property was being encroached upon, had any concerns. Through it all, I maintained a pleasant demeanor. When Sharon would see me in my yard and update me on the construction timeline, I'd nod appreciatively. When she invited me to join the Clubhouse Decoration Committee, I politely declined, citing my busy work schedule. "You know, Frank," she said one evening as she happened to be walking by my house, "once the clubhouse is finished, your property value is going to jump at least 15%. You really lucked out with that location. I smiled. Seems like I did. What Sharon didn't know was that I'd been meeting with a real estate attorney named Sonia Harris. Sonia had reviewed my documentation and confirmed that I had an airtight case. But she also suggested that timing would be crucial. Let them finish, she advised. Document everything, but let them complete the project before you make your move. It was difficult to watch as they installed the plate glass windows facing the pond. My pond, technically, since the survey showed the water's edge was within my property line. It was even harder to stay quiet when they began landscaping, cutting down 2 mature oak trees that had stood on what was indisputably my land. But I continued to wait, taking photos, making notes, and gathering evidence. The clubhouse was scheduled for its grand opening on Labor Day weekend. The week before, I received an embossed invitation to the ribbon-cutting ceremony. Sharon had even listed me as a special thanks contributor in the program, though I'd contributed nothing but my silence and my land. 2 days before the ceremony, I noticed unusual activity at the construction site. Multiple trucks from various suppliers arrived, dropping off furniture, exercise equipment, and electronics. What caught my attention, though, was that none of the delivery men requested signatures. They simply unloaded and left, with no paperwork changing hands. That evening, I took my usual walk around the neighborhood and accidentally encountered Greg Hartwell supervising the unloading of a truck. "Evening, Greg," I called out casually. "Clubhouse is looking great." He seemed startled to see me but quickly recovered. "Thanks, Frank. Sharon's really proud of how it's turned out." "I bet. Must be good for your business too, landing the contract and all." His expression tightened slightly. "Well, we gave the HOA a good rate." "I'm sure you did," I replied, then gestured toward the truck. "Getting all the finishing touches in place for Saturday?" "Yeah, just some furniture and stuff." He glanced at his watch. "Look, I gotta run." "See you at the opening?" "Wouldn't miss it," I assured him. After he left, I circled back and watched from a distance as the workers unloaded boxes labeled with high-end brand names, much more expensive than what had been shown in the plans presented at HOA meetings. A worker dropped one box, spilling its contents, crystal champagne flutes that I was certain weren't in the budget approved by residents. The next morning, I met with Sonia one last time. We reviewed our strategy, finalized our documentation, and made several important phone calls. Everything was in place for the grand opening. Saturday arrived with perfect late summer weather. A large tent had been set up beside the clubhouse, with catering tables, a small stage, and rows of white chairs for the ceremony. By 10 a.m., about 100 residents had gathered, chatting excitedly about yoga classes and wine tastings in the new space. Sharon stood on the stage in a crisp white pantsuit, her diamond earrings catching the sunlight as she welcomed everyone. I positioned myself near the back, nodding politely as neighbors greeted me. "And now," Sharon announced, "I'd like to invite the board members to join me for the official ribbon cutting." 5 people, including Greg, moved to the stage as Sharon continued her speech. "This beautiful facility represents the future of Oak Ridge Estates. It's been completed on budget and on schedule, thanks to the excellent work of our contractors." She flashed a smile at her husband. "In a moment, we'll cut the ribbon and invite everyone inside to tour your new clubhouse. But first, I want to acknowledge someone special who helped make this possible." My stomach tightened as Sharon's gaze found me in the crowd. "Frank Xavier has been such a good neighbor throughout this project. The clubhouse sits very close to his property line, and he never once complained about the noise or disruption. Frank, would you please come up and join us for the ribbon cutting?" Murmurs and polite applause rippled through the crowd as all eyes turned to me. I smiled, nodded, and made my way to the stage, where Sharon handed me one end of the ceremonial scissors. "Thank you, Sharon," I said, my voice carrying over the PA system. "I've been watching this project with great interest from day one." Sharon's smile faltered slightly at my tone. "In fact," I continued, "I've documented every phase of construction very carefully. It's been fascinating to watch this building take shape, On my property. The crowd went silent. Sharon's smile disappeared entirely. What are you talking about, Frank? She hissed, trying to maintain her composure. I reached into my jacket and pulled out the survey map, unfolding it for everyone to see. According to this certified survey, approximately 40% of this building sits on land that belongs to me, not the HOA. Gasps and whispers erupted from the audience. Sharon grabbed the microphone. There's clearly been some mistake, she said, her voice tight. Our contractors verified the boundaries before construction began. Did they? I asked innocently, then turned to address the crowd. I find that interesting, because I have emails from 3 separate surveyors confirming my property lines. I also have documentation showing that no permit application for this project included a professional survey. Greg stepped forward, his face reddening. Now listen here. No, you listen. I cut in, my military voice returning. I've been very patient. I've watched as you cut down my trees, built on my land, and misled these good people about what their HOA fees were funding. I gestured toward a woman who had quietly joined us at the side of the stage. This is Sonia Harris, my attorney. She has copies of the survey for anyone who wants to see it, along with documentation of some other interesting findings. Sharon tried to grab the microphone back, but I held firm. For instance, I continued, did everyone know that the construction contract was awarded without competitive bidding to Hartwell Construction? Or that the furniture and fixtures being installed cost nearly twice what was approved in the budget you all voted on? The crowd was fully engaged now, people standing up, some shouting questions. I noticed a news van pulling into the parking lot, right on schedule, thanks to an anonymous tip about community corruption, called in the previous day. This is absurd. Sharon sputtered into the microphone we now both held. The board approved everything legally. Speaking of legal, I said calmly, I should mention that the county inspector and a detective from the Economic Crimes Unit are also here today. On cue, 2 men in suits approached the stage, badges visible on their belts. The crowd parted to let them through. Sharon's face went from angry red to ashen in seconds. Greg started backing away toward the rear of the stage. Mr. Xavier has brought some concerning irregularities to our attention, the detective announced. We'll need to speak with Mrs. Hartwell and the board members regarding potential violations of state contracting laws and misappropriation of funds. What followed was better than any reality TV show. The detective explained to the stunned crowd that preliminary investigation had uncovered evidence that the Hartwells had been inflating invoices, substituting cheaper materials than what had been paid for, and pocketing the difference, all while building on property that wasn't legally available to them. The county inspector added that the building hadn't been properly permitted for commercial use and would need to be re-inspected before anyone could enter. Sharon was escorted to a police car for questioning, still protesting her innocence. Greg attempted to flee but was stopped by a patrol officer waiting in the parking lot. 3 of the 5 board members claimed complete ignorance, while 2 others suddenly became very interested in their shoes. As the chaos unfolded, residents surrounded me, some angry, some confused, many grateful that someone had finally stood up to Sharon's regime. What happens to the clubhouse now? Asked Mrs. Patterson, the elderly woman who'd been fined over her mailbox. I looked at the building, beautiful, almost finished, and substantially on my property. Well, I said, that depends on what the community wants. Over the next few weeks, the full extent of the Hartwell's scheme unraveled. They had embezzled nearly $200,000 from the HOA through fraudulent billing and kickbacks. Both were arrested and charged with multiple felonies. The board was dissolved, and an emergency election was held to appoint new leadership. To everyone's surprise, I ran for a position and won. My first proposal was to properly survey all community properties and establish clear boundaries. My second was to create a fair and transparent process for all HOA decisions. As for the clubhouse, I negotiated an agreement with the new board. In exchange for a 99-year lease on my portion of the land, at a very reasonable $1 per year, the building would be completed legally, with proper permits, and would be named after Mrs. Patterson, our oldest resident. I insisted on just 2 conditions. First, that the facility would be truly open to all residents without additional fees. Second, that a portion of the space would be dedicated to a community resource center, offering free classes and services to neighborhood children and seniors. 6 months later, I stood at the podium for the real grand opening of the Patterson Community Center. As I looked out at the smiling faces, families who would use the pool, seniors who would gather for coffee, kids who would receive tutoring in the learning lab, I couldn't help but think that sometimes patience is more than a virtue. Sometimes it's the perfect revenge. The former board members who'd claimed ignorance were required to perform community service hours at the center. Most discovered they actually enjoyed giving back to their neighbors. Mrs. Patterson herself cut the ribbon, her non-regulation mailbox now proudly displayed in the lobby as a symbol of individuality within community. As for Sharon and Greg Hartwell, they eventually accepted a plea deal. They sold their house in Oak Ridge Estates to pay restitution and legal fees. I heard they moved to a condo in the city, one without an HOA. And me? I still run my drafting business, still keep my lawn at regulation height, and still attend every HOA meeting. But now, when I sit on my back deck with my morning coffee, I look out at a community center that represents the best of what neighbors can do together, rather than the worst. The property line dispute turned out to be the best thing that ever happened to Oak Ridge Estates. Sometimes the most valuable boundaries are the ones that, once properly established, can be generously shared.